Input, output, audio. What is that lines of position, location, and retraction, ascending division? System.
Norse mythology.
It comes in high signals, lines, and grounds. High operation screens, directing lines and modification system and travel. Coursing through line settings and mechanisms, high force lines and satellites and towers and mechanisms that position, location, and travel communicates to its cycles. Getting track lines is a confirmation system that aligns at high positions, which means everything you get in position is constellation to its awareness in real-time real measure. It's constantly in a continuous flow. You guys have always been existing all at once, but I need the team to modify that, not just the mind of instruction in position to create it through its anomaly or anything through schematics. I need to come into the voice line grid. So this is what's going to happen in set positions. They're coming in their 72 computer line settings. The process calculation lines a high center interference at 7,000 lines perimeters over screen, directing lines of 200,000 line measure. That scales this communication system over line sequence over lines of pi. Processing communication puts them into 72,000 clocking in positional levels. Now that's core center locations that are line set in position of P located to its I. That's a running lines and process communication initially line position of a platform. That's the core track location that human residence and point lines of communication set into power points. In that tracks lines, setting direct lines of link. So in that communication high position locations. The most powerful thing that you guys have to recognize is basically you know so much, but you know very little of your body. And now you're coming in positions already what you already know through your body in real-time measure, in real scale, in real balance, living all time lines all at once, existing all at once, in all lines, all formation setting of clocking and communications happening in all traction. Setting position, location, and measures scales communication system all through settings. Now where line position is the audio line signals, concentration awareness, is coming into positions at real-time measure, scales of communication in chronological order. Everything that you see on the game itself is in chronological order. Platforms is setting, E factors over line, set position of center communications, setting lines of 45 lines, split lines of anomaly lines of 3 track locations. Okay, so the ground lines of 1, ground lines of 3, and ground lines of 4 interactions. Okay, pi generation screen. Okay. Process lines indicate system and line position into the compass in track locations inside. Okay, so we got wind factors over 3 lines of signals, 4 lines of measure, and 2 track locations and high set position lines of travel. Okay, so we go through platforms over 1, platforms over 2, cross lines of 3, cross lines of 4, overline signal, overline panel, overline track set position. Okay, setting ground lines, sets lines communication setting all through tractions. All through direct signal location setting to your pyramid. Okay, so we go through high lines of measure, scales communication lines of 4 signals and track location to a system, all through perimeters and parameters, setting core lines of channels, overline sequence and particle acceleration setting, and line rotation surface interactions. Then we go through the ground lines, set position location measure and scale communication. Okay, overline sequence. So we cross lines, calculation lines at 1 center, overline cross locations, setting direct signal into sol panels, and track correlation setting in solar systems. Process lines indicate lines of 1 platform, 2 platforms, X-line line rotation, X-line platforms, and planets and track locations. Directing course centers back and traction, back division, back location system, all through calculations. High signals, high travel communications, all through direction. All right, so in that direct signals, we process communication lines of setting. Open signals and ground lines of surface and location setting to traffic inventory. Process line communication, overline signals, and communication lines of center communication. Okay, so we go through the lines of perimeters, parameters, location grids, over cross location grid lines, high line cross location lines of screen lines adaptation to 3 lines of communication setting, over lines of track correlation system. Okay, now indicate position lines of power, overline signals, 1 center line positions, light signal lines of 2 panels. Okay, those are 2 panels, cross lines of 1 signal. Propellers and 2-line of rotation setting and track communication lines of center operation system. Not everything is all communicating with everything all at once until you identify everything in real time. Once you get into real time measure, then you get out of the past, present, and future. Now the position location one comes in all confirmation system. Everything around you has its own audio input now. That's an audio line circuit location, audio line high position interference that puts line position or reset position on programs in 120,000 seconds per setting. that puts this location to its system, opens all calculated lines of 3 million line centers in sight line, high position location, direct line of view, that puts you on track location of consciousness, and that track correlates in setting to its awareness and travel. Setting lines of ground line communicates in high position location to its system, all through traction. Okay? Setting ground lines of 1 and process lines of 4. And process lines of signals over cross location lines of setting, XT platform and direct signals modification grounds. Process lines of indicate setting, high process lines of 3 platforms, indicate cross location system, all through tractions. Okay? Direct lines of view, process lines and setting position 1, 2, and 3, 4, 6, 8, 12, and 24 set position. Okay, travel court lines is setting high direct signals. Ground lines is surface, cross location of symbolism. Center court system into portal communication lines is center and track communications. Okay, direct line view over cross location screens and set track location. Very complicated stuff, a lot of fun. Okay? So once we identify everything is communicating all at once, then we understand how to modify that through conscious location to its awareness of its audio line. So if your TV's off, it's going to get in a way to communicate with your system because your 7-digit number is track location lines of 3. That puts the lines of the area code and track correlates lines of 10 X lines of 2, puts lines of 12 lines of measure and 12 DNA. Setting 12 lines of division lines of high set position location to its system. Now everybody in position lines and track correlation setting is position of 24,000 grounds. That puts lines in seconds, minutes, and hours and travel endpoint lines of 72, position of 144 platform and position location and crystal gridding. Setting lines of communication setting. Remember, this is all percentage, this is all volume, this is all acceleration, this is all VAC. Setting lines of communication setting to 3, 4 lines of setting puts lines of 7 over lines over 12. Setting offline communication lines of 24 measure. Now it scales its communication system while through travel. Direct lines of grounds sets all communication setting high positions to the atmospheres, hemispheres, stratospheres, bio, and branium. All line signals high position location setting. 4 lines of signals is summer, spring, winter, and fall, coming all together in 144 platform. So it's about understanding the percentage that you have, okay? It's the percentage of your brain that puts everything of waving screens in adaptation system in track location of its question. Questioning the mark, communication lines and visible chart waves coming into the human resonance a higher frequency that puts everything of process communication, everything of intelligence coming to you in conscious location settings into its consciousness of its awareness, bringing in position location all lines of signals through its intelligence, coming to you and your TVs, your box, your frames, communication, your computers, or anything in track correlation setting in lights. That puts all communication setting into its audio interference to its audio line core center location of sonic waves. Setting lines of tracks and set locations into 3 lines of 4 over measure, scales communication lines of 7 and 12 lines of communications. Your 12 DNA, okay, your 24,000 grounds is your paradigm, and your 144 of the mind's eye. Puts this all together in track location to its system. All 3 track centers, okay, all 3 high position. All right, so I need the team because they're coming in there 72 operators in the units, basically understand how to modify the mind line, but also understand how the voice line. So in that position locations and that tractions, what you have to identify now is everything is governing its own system, right? It's controlling its own system, right? So as soon as you're on TV, as soon as you're in that position, but you're not talking to the TV, it's governing its own setting. It's working its own system. It's running its own system. As soon as you speak, you're in control of everything you get in positions of. If you don't speak in positions, there's off-track location setting where it constantly continues and runs its own system until you get into your voicing line setting, okay, and your tractions. So I'm just getting you guys consciously aware of what's happening with the intelligence around your system through all track locations, your settings. Process lines in 1 signal, solar panels a 3-line rotation. Cross lines, propellers over cross location and screen lines adaptation. Setting core centers, directing signals at 1 over lines of 3 over 4 and track locations. Your solar system rotates the system lines of travel with 3 lines of measure. Scales communication high centers, sets position circulation rotation setting and track correlation system existing all on once. Setting process line position of parallels, process communication setting, which means you go through high position location measure and scales and track correlation to its system. Okay, there's your solar system. All right, so set track location, line position location. Your sun can split lines of anomaly 2 track locations, but it's always together in track communications. All right, setting 3 lines of flux and a T-line screen. Directing lines in a 3-1 wire, line rotation line, position location 3 lines of measure and molecule design line. Setting line rotation surface and center communication setting opens all signals, opens all panels, and solar track correlation. Sending track division location next to outside lines, outside window, and travel. Sending communication high position location, height center line position location, height settings, high position location of system, all through a mothership and downline shift lines of anomaly. Sending course centers, upline swing line, course centers line position location to a system, all through tractions. Directing lines modification grounds, 4 lines of setting, 4 lines of box, 4 lines of windows, center course system, mainframe track location setting, high position location measure and scale. Bring it back in frequency, bring it back in panel, bring it back in operation cycle. Okay. All right. So setting of the solar system to your settings to your solar system is knowing exactly how to identify your lines in your ancestry, history, and celestial. Getting intelligence information system is all lines, graph, communication, setting, and point graphs. Setting graph lines of 1, Schumann resonance of 3 cycles, data formation lines, and 2 lines of set position location, 3 atoms, rotational lines, and track location to its setting. Process lines of indication system over track locations, 1 platform, cross line signals, 2 platforms, cross locations inside and outside through track locations. Directing lines on eye lines, high line and rotation setting, direct lines of view in position 3 lines of measure. Scales communication over cross locations in the opposite lines of 3 lines of measure. Scales communication high position location inside, outside line position all at once and travels in point lines of graph and set track location to its system. Okay? Coming to ground lines of surface and track communication lines of walls and direct signals, ground lines of surface and set position. All right, so we process communication lines of 1 signal. Ground lines of set position operation signals and high position location to its measure. Scales communication high settings and 3 doors of measure and communications. 3 doors and tractions. All right. Sets calculation lines of 3 lines. High position lines of 4 communication lines of surface and traction. All right, it has a direct line view. We cross lines of signals and process communications. This is 1 room interactions, 1 brainwaving pattern, and a 4-box screen adaptation lines of surface and track locations. Overline signals, ground lines of set position, overline signal, and positions of communications. Setting ground lines as high positions of windows inside and position lines outside. Process lines, overline sequence over cross location setting and cross referencing. Direct lines of modification grounds, sets communication setting above signal and track communications. Very complicated stuff, but it's a lot of fun. Setting lines of high position location comes into the location grid. Sets communication lines of this way in the opposite angle and track communications. Setting signals, modification high centers. So now we get window frames, process lines of 1, process lines of 2, process lines of 3, process lines of 4, and process lines of 6. Sets course centers, cross line angles, setting lines of tractions, and 2 lines of measure and screen adaptation, and track relations. All right. Now we have a direct line view. We open up the signal lines of 4 lines of windows, sets per line course centers, lines, overline the sequence, platforms over cross locations and measures and scale. That communicates the system all through travels in position of center core system of a pyramid and set track location. Pyramid line screen line adaptation settings sets the flux lines of screen. Operation signals and set position location measure that scales communication lines of flux and 3 triangulation high centers opens all signals and ground lines of surface and tractions. Higher levels of schematics and high track locations. Okay, so we overline the panels. There's the ceiling and travel. All right, see the ceiling, see the doors. All right. So we have a direct line view. Remember, it's all signal line position all at once, existing all at once, communicating all at once, all formation, all communicates, all grounds, all foundations, all clocking, all at once, all at once. No past, no present, no future. The team needs to get out of that through referencing now. Because the offline to communication setting, to bring position and patterns, to change communication high centers, it puts all communication off position, off communication, offline communication, off grid, off position at row game. Setting lines of signals and communication lines of confusion. Okay, process lines of signals, cross lines of setting, and 4 to 5 communication lines of anomaly, track correlation system of travel. Directing ground lines and high set location system all through travel. Setting communication high position lines of high position, center communication high center location of the system all through track locations. Okay? Directing lines of point lines of view, open signals and ground communications. All right, so we go through the center positions. Now we go through triangulation of 3 centers in process of 4 communications, inside tractions, inside setting. Then we go into modification grounds, set communication setting, and point lines communications, window frames, center course system into line setting and process lines, light signals, light metaphors, line positions of inside and out through traction. Okay? Then we go with the line signals, ground lines of surface, and set position lines of ceiling lines of travel communications. This is all through 1 window frame and 1 box frame and 1 TV receptor and 1 track locations and sending in windows. Okay, so we process and communicate over cross lines. The 3 line signals over cross communication comes in its compound. 3 signals lines of 1, and position lines of 4 track correlation system, and 6 lines of measure that scales with communication lines of setting. Setting communication lines of grounds, over line sequence, over lines of panel, and 40 line position split lines of anomaly. Setting ground lines of service, cross line communication setting over lines of positions. Cross positions here, and signify line position over here, setting track lines over here, setting line position over here, and setting center lines of windows over here, and travel in position of 4 graph communications. Sending direct signals and ground lines of service. Okay? Bring it back home, back in sequence, back in panel, back in operation setting. Hoo-ah. So getting measure lines of scale is a balance of communication system all through tractions. Direct lines of point lines of graph puts everything in set position location in settings and tractions. So we have dimensional lines of doors, signify and line rotation settings over lines of flux of 3 settings. Okay, process lines of 3, overline, cross referencing in set position. Set position of security, set line position lines of panel. Okay, setting core centers. Setting direct line signals and process communication lines of 3 lines into arrows, window 8 and high center interference, high position of travel, direct lines, modification grounds. Sets communication lines of 1 lines of measure and 2 track locations. Setting track lines, setting core system location inside track locations, inside the position. Okay, so we got floor lines. We had a triangulation of 1 and we have a triangulation of 2 over cross location settings. Process lines of triangulation lines of 3 over tractions. Directing signals and position, that's where we go to point lines, charted waves, and 3 lines of 4 lines of measure. Scales communication, high position lines of alpha, coming into delta, coming into theta, it's location lines of omega, and travel. Setting track lines of high position location measure, and scales communication high set, position line high setting. Process lines of indication system, all lines of 0, inline and out, outline and in, opposite direct signals, inside position, 3 track location system, all through travel. Hoo-ah. So, getting a position location is knowing exactly what you're doing through travel communications. Okay? So this helps you and guides you to really understand how to modify that and alter triangulation set lines of reflush. A reflush to a flushing screen adaptation of cycle sets communication your water containment system in square root. Process lines of windows, process lines of indication setting, and 4 lines of communication setting to travel. Okay? Overline sequence, 3 lines of measure, cross line communication lines, and 1 box frame position. Okay? Cross line signals, cross line communications of 45 angle, 3 lines of signals, 1 to position, 3 lines of measure of scale, in highways and tractions. X2000 comes in line position locations of docking and screen. Okay? Getting communication of floor mats, signify line screen adaptations of 3 lines of flux over screen. Directing lines of indication setting and platforms of 1, 2, and 3, and 4 set position attractions. Okay, so we ground lines, we come into the ceiling line and centers, set position, location, measure, and scale. Okay, so it gets more complicated when you come to sky nets. The sky position lines of high sky force puts all communication lines of grounds and track location setting to 3 lines of setting. Sets communication high position lines of travel, point lines of set position. Your hardware and software is a mechanism lines of force that puts everything in travel communication to its portals. Setting communication lines of grounds, center core system, over cross location settings, and 2 platforms of measure that scales communication setting from 1 parallel to a position line to its paradigm. Process calculation lines of high centers, the triangulation flux. Sets communication lines of 1 indicates setting and travels in point communication system, and 3 lines of measure and scale communications. Ooh-ah, inside traction. Then we go through overline sequence and line position location measure. Okay? So these are molecules and 3 lines of signals. Atom lines, 3 rotation surface interactions. Remember, it's all done inside traction. Mechanism of force. We get a position lines of high center. We box the frame lines and 4 lines of signals. Setting lines of 4 communication setting and tethers to electron to a proton. Now we're going through the cell modification lines of bridging. So it sets lines, core centers, and 3 communication setting lines of surface and traction. Complicated stuff, but it's a lot of fun. Directing ground lines sets communication over line sequence and set position. Inside track locations. Intelligence communicate with each other. All right, now, how to modify the rings and all communication lines of 12 line clocky lines and have it extend the position location, how it core lines its communication lines of high setting. In that communication grounds, bring it back home, back in sequence, back in balance, back in position, location, and setting. Inside track location. So remember I told you about the inside and the outside? Well, now it's position location. So each window frame, each triangulation, each box into its flux, into its flux and track location, right? Now it's connected to sonar. Okay, in 4 setting, 3 communication system. Setting lines of 2 track correlates and lines of echo. Box is line position locations and lines of high position as a 3, set position lines of 4, set position lines of 1, and set position of 2 track correlates and setting of satellite. Directing signal lines of grounds, change the communication lines of grounds, a surface and track correlates and system and travel. Directing ground lines, sets over cross location equilibrium and 3 attractions. Directing lines of triangulation flux, direct relation high position location of flux over box over frame over 3. Setting track lines, direct lines of 1 signal, 1 traction, 1 division, 1 location. Okay? Cross lines and 4 lines of signals, cross lines and 3 lines of signals and travel. Process lines indicate positions of box frames, overline sequence line communication lines of travel, box over frame. Setting triangulation line position of 0, process line signal location system, alter travel communications. Dimensional sail, process lines of 1 indications lines of flux over screen cross lines 1 angle, process line signal, process line division, and track communication lines, overline signal, and panel communications. Okay, so it has direct line view in satellites and communication to Skynet and travel communications. Okay, so it gets more complicated when you got high frequency. So 72 platforms is a box frame into all lines into meta frame. Meta frame and psychological communication screen lines and psychosis in 1 box frame. Set communication lines of grounds, overline sequence, overline position, and 2 lines of track communications and setting. Division lines, laser track centers of 3 centers, 3 measure, 3 scales, 3 balance, 3 cores, 3 traction, 3 division, 3 locations, 3 centers, 3 operation set position. Okay. Signifies, ground lines of setting, process lines indicates the setting. You guessed it. There's your satellite, outlines the signals to travel into its dimensional door. See the door, see the scale, see the measurement and the position of your satellite. Okay. Satellite signals, line and rotation system on ground lines of surface. Sets travels in point lines of communication setting, high travel communications. Okay. Indicates lines of its dimensional door. Dimensional door gets longer, elongated screens. Open all signals into 2 platforms, overline, rotation, surface, and track correlation system. Okay, and then we come into the ground lines of surface and traction. Now, getting the ground lines of surface is very powerful when we go in a 45 angle. We split lines of anomaly into 4 track centers and direct signals of 12 lines of flush in traffic and inventory in a 4 communication setting and track correlation system and 50 yards in screen. Setting communication set doesn't look like much, right? But it's very powerful stuff. So every line, every wire has an in and out in audio now. That line signals puts everything in intelligence estimation system to longitude, latitude through its coordinates, knowing exactly how to get a provisional location of Pluto and set coordinates in line position location of Pi and track correlation system. Come into Saturn and set position lines of 2 angles and point lines of graph into circulation rotation and center position. Coming into Mercury and ground lines of surface, set position location measure, sets course center lines of 70% lines of 30. That puts lines of 100 line course centers and percentage over question. Setting track lines of division location of setting. Ooh-ah. Setting high position of center of communication, high position of force position. Setting communication high track location of a system, all through 3 lines of communication setting. All through traction. Complicated stuff, right? But it's a lot of fun, right? Your drawings, your schematics just get a lot more confusing. High line signals back in frequency. Okay? Okay. So remember, all this is connected to your solar system. What's going on in seconds, minutes, and hours. Setting lines of provision sets lines of wall sequence. Now we have lines of releasing lines of 2 patterns and 3 measured. Okay? Now we indicate the grounds. We set lines of security panels over line sequence and 3 lines of measured communications. Setting track centers. Getting lines of blue over lines of signal location settings and 2 position lines of travel. Overline connection center. Now get in that rotation system, change the alpha waves. So we go into purple screens, set lines of 3 lines of 8, 3 lines of 2, and 3 lines of 6, 8, 8, 8. 6 position lines of 1, set position 1 graph. That's 1 signal, position lines of 1 center, and position a half center, and position of 1/3. Equals line set position location at 25th line, setting track lines into 3 levels, setting position lines of question over traction. Okay. Now the direct line center It's very powerful when you get into modification lines, the high position of house. House is your position of your hotel and golf. Knowing how to direct lines into fail-safe, travels its line rotation service and track communications. Directing modification lines at grounds of 1, platforms of 2, and platforms of 3, and measure and scale and data ports. Sending lines of 3 signals, 3 lines of ground lines of surface interactions. Audio frames, high center lines of ground correlation setting is human residence. Process calculated lines of alpha, delta, and theta, and set position of theta through mega screen adaptation lines of surface interaction. Setting signals, XT1001, XT1002 outline, out course and out division location to a system. At settings, setting core lines of calculation setting, S-guard, and set position of center operation. Hooah. Setting lines of grounds has a platforms of C. That's ground lines of setting, the cross line communication lines of D. Time measure, time scale. All right. Time editing, ground lines of surface and webbing. Indirect signals, ground lines of surface interactions. Setting communicates high position location, measure and scale. Indicate position of 4 centers. All through connection. All right. Now we go into ground lines, energetic dome. 4 lines of flush, 3 lines of measure. Scales communication lines of sprinkler. Send an anagram to a scrambler and track creation system all through travel. Booyah. All right, so we cross the signals, overline cross location to a system. Okay, so we set up an evac. Now an evac sets up the platforms and setting of travels with 3 communication setting and walking lines of service and 4 settings. Setting ground lines of service, over cross location screens, setting XT1000 and platform communications. Setting track lines. Okay, so we have an outline sequence. Data ports, inline and outline. Outline and inline. 3 lines of signals, 2 lines of measure and scale. Okay, box frames are 2 lines of triangulation of angles. Now it gets more complicated because now you go into multiplication, adding, subtracting, and dividing in 4 signals and travel communications. Very complicated stuff, a lot of fun. Now the override sets lines and overcharge. Have high direct signal case and default 3 able. Ables and angles, line communication setting, so you can see the face, see the eyes, line position of its mouth. See the face? All right? See the face? Okay, very powerful and see when track location to a setting, it's all through profile. So we have 4 signals, lines of 1, sets communication over line signals. And we have 4 line communication lines that indicate setting on left line screen adaptation system. 3 angle points, 3 configuration setting. Looking this way, and looking straight. Okay, all through set position, see? That's what you can do with configuration of faces. Setting lines of signals this way, setting line signals this way, and setting line signals this way, setting line signals this way, this way, this way, and this way. All at once. So your body has to be in alignment, guys, in real-time measure. Scaling communication lines of 3 signals into 4 communication lines in a center operation system all through travel. Okay? All right, setting signals, back interaction, back division, back locations. All through attractions. In set position and high positions of face recognition. Oh yeah. All right, so your body alignment now has to go under line rotations and under relays. High position lines are or line in the measures, scales communication lines are or lines of pi. That puts lines colors centers. Let's go through 17 measure. Let's go through 6 lines anomaly, setting lines position into 2850. So we're going to take 50 yards, 50 miles, 50 tractions, 50 locations, and set position of 1 division and set lines of ozone. Course centers, direct signal. Then we modify the system lines of 2 lines of cycles, 8 lines of measure. Scales communication lines of 2 measure and position lines 8 4 track location system. Setting lines position location of 3 lines of communication. Okay? Complicated stuff, that's a lot of fun. All right, so we line signal into the perimeter parameters and 3 lines of course. Setting direct signals to grounds. Set calculation screen lines, adaptation of flux, that sets communication lines of ceiling and track communications. Okay? All right, so we simulate as the ground lines, 3 lines of signals, process lines, and 3 door measures, scales communication sending high lines of surface. All right, so we measure the scale. Now we go through line position lines, high centers into 2 track locations, setting direct lines and position lines of 3 over 4 line communication lines of travel. Direct lines of indication lines of 1 XT1000 on platform, on 1 hanger, 1 traction, 1 division location to its setting. Okay, it overcross those schemes, Down set lines and dimension lines of scale. Okay. Process lines indicate lines of 3 lines of measure of scale and top of the sequence. Downward shift line, process line, in center, line position location, in position lines of ground, in position lines of reality, and set setting. Process indication line, track location lines, stargate, start portals, in 3 line measures and 1 line position location to a system. You're not allowed to see it. It's too fast. Setting lines of travel. Okay. Setting lines of direct signals, lines of communication, lines of travel. Okay. Indicates position lines of program. Okay. Line signals, process communication lines of ground, lines of surface. Now this indicates high position lines of power. The power generation lines of the power points, line signals, location setting, and high lines of travel. Sets position lines of 18 lines of measure. Now the time change lines, and remember, everything is set position up at all levels. Time does not change if it's a continuous force. The only thing that changes you through intent. Once you change the intent, everything around you changes the seconds, minutes, and hour in real time, real measure of everything in set position. Not only you change the frequencies, but you change everything in space and time, inside and outside and inside of you. So you got to be very careful what you're doing because everything's existing and everything's evolving, everything's expanding all at once now, in real time, in real scale, in real balance, in real measure, in real foundation, in real clocking, existing all at once. Hooah. All right, scale communication lines of screens, adaptation lines of flux over line. They have a high position location of travel, taking line signals in a higher communication system. Inside lines of 3 and position of box lines of 3 lines of signals at line position. Now, communication line centers, you can stay in 3 lines of signals out. So you can be in and out, or you can just be out. In high position, over cross locations, inside position, inside and outside, outside and inside. But it's a webbing panel when it comes into a half pipe. Half pipe position lines of 3 over center. Sets communication high travels, indirect signals, and ground lines of surface. Okay, so we cross the signals. This is where it comes in high position lines of measure and scale. Processing communication lines of 3 lines of signals, molecules lines of 3 track relays and setting 3 atoms, routes the routers and rotation system, all through track relay setting, existing all at once in set track location. Ooh-ah. Setting line, position, location, measure, and scale communication. Okay. So signify tunnels. Have a direct lines in earth core, set calculation lines and crop circles and set position lines of travel. Okay. Code weaving, directing signals inside track correlation system and a 45 flush. Flush over screen, center core system overline signals. Process lines that indicate setting of bold screens, adaptation of fonts. Signify core lines of letters, numbers, shapes, and symbols, and track communications. Directing lines of grounds, overline signal, overline panel, and position across communications. Directing signals of grounds. All right, so you guys have to get in position lines and measure and scale communication in your settings. You had a modified line setting. All right, so it's very important you understand how to communicate to your solar system and track locations, all through travel, all through measure, all through scale, all through communications and setting. All right. Solar system lines is solar identification setting sets ground lines as 0s over 12, 12 lines position at 24. So you're constantly working with 0 to 12, 12 to 24, to 48 to 72, 144. That's where it comes in line position, it's webbing. Webbing lines of 1. Okay, there's webbing lines of 1 in mapping sequence. Okay, there's webbing lines of 2, process lines of cloud line, E clouds, and center cloud communication lines of 4. Setting communication lines of ground, over cross location of its cloud that aligns its system over track location system all through tractions. Setting course centers, directing lines of high position at all levels. This is a compound line, position lines, and position location of travel. 2 clouds of indication lines, high position location to a system. How many clouds do you see in travel? Okay, you see lines of position, 3 lines of intelligence, set positions. 1 this way, then 1 this way, 1 this way, right? So we got 1 indicating this way, 1 indicating this way, 1 indicating this way, and 1 position over here, 1 position over here, and here, and here, and here, all at once in setting. So the clouds are looking in all directions, okay? XT1000 platform here, XT1000 platform here. It depends on the galaxy shift lines, communication lines of weather, line position of summer, spring, winter, and fall. Setting lines, communication, high position lines of measure, scales, communication setting, open line sequence, open lines panels, 3 lines of flux, 4 lines of measure, scales, communication setting, all through track location system to its holographic grid. Setting skylines, Skynet, sky division location setting to travel. Okay, setting course centers sets lines of 3 communication system, all through tractions. Direct lines of your pyramid, skyline division. 3 lines of signals, 4 lines of communication setting. Over cross lines, high position lines of travel. Okay, inside. Setting core lines, high position lines, a high set position of 3 lines of measure, and 3 lines of scales inside and outside together. Sets communication lines of 2 settings at 2 angles in position your satellite and communications. All right, so that indicates lines of flux over line. Galaxy shift lines, process lines of 1, process lines of 2, process lines of 3, process lines of 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, and 24 lines of measure locations of barometer, thermometers, and set position lines of travel. Setting core lines, center communication setting, high travels, in-point communication to its setting. Okay, signify, sun, modificate the system lines, 3 lines of angles, line, position locations, moon and track communication setting, 1 third line graph. Setting communications high centers, 3 lines of signals, process lines of 3 track coordinates and high position of projection. Setting signals, process and calculation setting, there's your satellite and track location. Booyah. All right, cross lines, communication high lines of surface interaction. Whoa. See the shield? See the shield? See the spin cycles? See the XC1000s? And position your sun and your moon. All 3 light signals, lines, projection, correlation, setting, and graph communication lines, your beacon lights, sets up perimeters and parameters, lines of your thermal core centers, lines of travel that has a direct line link into your star position location measures and communications. Setting communication lines of grounds, setting core center location, electrical fencing, and travel communication setting over lines of sequence. There's the fence, there's the wormhole, there's the position location near all over your sun and your moon. Ooh-ah. Okay, so we signify the grounds over line screen cross location setting to measure. Scales communicates high position location, measure line position location travel. Bring it back home, back in sequence, back in panel, back in operations and high position. Whoa. Okay? So wind tunnels, lines, summer, spring, winter, and fall. Clocking lines of 1 rotation, lines of 4 line signals, cross lines of 3 settings. Whoa, that just looks like a box and a line. Oh. It's a triangulation flux of 3 lines of angles. Box center line of 1, box center lines of 2, over cross location of 4 centers and travel. Complicated stuff, but if you look at the grounds, you can see the symbolism lines of attractions and 2 open sequence lines of position location to its setting. Oh, it's not there. It's not ready. Not ready. The frequencies are too high. So we got NK position of 1 center, over cross location, overlapping setting and position of pi, it generates a screen adaptation. Okay? Setting communicates high position, which is the double helix, the double flux, the position location, highest position of perimeters and parameters. This sets recourse line condition setting to reconfiguration system all through travel, all through direct line link. Okay. Now into that, all levels come into the double split experiment. 4 lines of signals, process lines of signal location and setting. Process lines of 1 over cross location system all through travel, 3 lines of measure. Scales communication lines of 2 lines of measure, 1 position lines and 1 box frame communication high track locations. Now we indicate the ground lines that opens all the signals and ground communication setting all through perception screen locations. Process lines of indication setting all through platforms, direct lines of 1 and process lines of 2, 3, 4, platforms of setting, 4 lines of 6, 8 lines of 12, 12 lines of signals and rotation lines of surface. Then we set the core system of center core system and line condition setting, electrical fencing. Direct lines of grounds and set position of traffic inventories and line position. Okay, so now we get into webbing line screens of 4 line signals, 4 lines communication lines, and 3 lines of measures. Scales communication of all position location of its doors, in line signals, and line communication system all through travel. All right, so we plotted the visual locations over lines of sequence and box frames. Okay, see the box frames communications? All right, now we have the XC1000 outline. Directing lines of grounds and 3 lines of measures, scales, communication lines, row graph calculation screens, and box frames. Setting core lines of 1 traction, 1 division, 1 location, 1 center. Remember, there's always pyramids and everything that you go in position in each room. It indicates lines of 3 lines, projections, astro projection, astro connections, and signals, and location of laser. Laser communication high centers of travel communications. Sahara Desert. Okay, Egypt. Right now, in real time. Right now, in real time. Egypt. Okay, so we got laser attractions. Let's add red line signals. We're going to cosmic flame, cosmic set location lines at high center interference, serpent flame, serpent fire, core centers lines of travel, position location, measure and scale, communication clouds, interference location, high clouds, high position lines of travel, directing signal location to a system, all through calculations. All right, so we modified the grounds, 3 signals, 1 in position 2 over 3 track locations. Okay? Setting core lines of laser position over cross location lines of 3 lines and 4 lines of measure. All right, so this is what goes on when you guys go into motion lines of screen. Motionless, senseless, and all lines of spaceless modificate the system, lines of travels, indirect lines of link, and process communication. Okay, window frames attractions. Now we overline the signals, and we overcross location to a system. Outlines, signifies a box frame. Overline signals and position line matrix core centers. Flux over screen and 3 lines of communication system, all through travel and track locations. Okay, overline signals and ground lines of surface and track communications. Okay. Sending direct line links, all communications sending high lines of travel. Okay, so that's how it connects all the pyramids, guys, and really understand how you come in your visionary cortex. That's how you connect all pyramids, all through laser attractions, your cosmic flame, your cosmic fire, your serpent flame, and your serpent fire. But it's all position, location, measure, and scale. All right. Now the configuration setting in light code sets lines of blue lines of cycles and 3 lines of communication setting of walking line screen adaptation. Okay, 3 lines of signals. Now we override lines, process into 12 lines of measure, the scale, and secure line defense line. Then we get into position lines all levels. So we had the orange line, that's the creative line, intuitive system locations. Setting lines into marking screens, web and screen lines, watermarks. 3 watermarks and line position of computer framing attractions. Okay, now that indicates lines of ground lines. Now we override this sequence and we put all lines of pyramids in cloak and dagger. This protects your system lines of seconds, minutes, and hours. Over cross location setting that puts the astral projections, astral travels, and travel in position of visual cortex to your theta into your imagination system, all through track location. Ooh ah. Double equation. Okay. Bring it back home in sequence, back at panel, back in operation setting. All right, so now you have to understand how to walk, how to fly, and how to levitate in high lines, screen lines adaptation on 144 platform. 3 signals. So you got a 72 line. Process lines of blue. Okay, position line. Process lines of 1 in red and positions all setting. Signify high position lines of black and track locations, 3 settings. Indicate position over lines, inside, process lines, outside rotation, surface, and traction. Now, understanding how your solar system works, guys, is to understand the center operation of your platform. Circulation, sending track lines into rotation. Okay? Merkaba 1, Merkaba 2, Merkaba 3, and line rotation, Merkaba 5. Setting communication lines, flick the switch, and screen adaptation. Overline sequence of panel, process line open panel, indicate position over line signals, process lines that indicate settings, solar communication setting, a solar operation of my Earth, and center communications. There's your Earth in the center. Let's color the line screen, directing lines at E, position lines at all levels, setting core lines at high centers, lines at G, and rotation lines, setting position location measure, and part acceleration set, and position location of set position. Okay, override sequence, line position location measure, scales communication lines and mapping sequence, infant structure location system, ground lines of settings, over cross location of screens, and set position lines of travel. Okay, so we indicate lines of blue. Now the blue lines is 7 lines of course, that position location notification setting that puts lines course centers, 1 tracking device lines and 1 measure, 1 scale, 1 communication, 1 center, 1 operation position with laser, line connects and high settings, processing communication lines of laser, track communication lines of pyramid, and direct signals, ground lines, calculation lines, imagination core, setting core, set position location of blue line and measure, scales communication lines of high position location setting, into process calculations. 7 lines of signals, set track in position point lines of graph communication, Earth and setting. Booyah. So your Earth is always in the center operation. Okay? But you got to see it on the 4 communication lines of angles and traction. Now we get in lines of digital line locks, course centers into crop circle location settings, lines of travel, direct the signals, modify the grounds, high track correlation setting, and code weaving, set position of face recognition. Face recognition. Okay, inside. Okay. Okay, so we recourse back in setting position lines of panel. That communicates the grounds. We color this communicates lines of high settings. Your position on the high signals, lines of colors, lines of 1 pattern over cross location of screen. You're constantly traveling through seconds, minutes, and hours, guys. So you have to understand position location of travel. Two orange lines calculates the lines of one green line surface. Overline cross locates inside and outside through transits that has a transaction lines of divots. Setting chord lines of travel, sets position location measure, goal line screen, adaptation lines of setting, 3-line rotation surface and traction. Okay, coming to your solar system. Setting position lines of high position lines of travel. 4 lines of measure, 4 lines of scale. Now we're going to go with the outline. We're going to color it the black, inside rotation, outside calculation. 3 lines of measure, 3 lines of scale. 4 lines of measure, 4 lines of scale. Set position of 7 over 12 or 24. Set it communicates height centers inside track rotation setting. Setting lines into all communication setting and travel. Inside position lines of height setting. Process communicate inside position lines of travel. Infrastructure lines, planet lines of service, echo chamber, sonar. Sonic interference, hydraulic case lines of in and out in audio. Setting line position location of 4 lines communication setting. In planets of service, in solar track locations, in high position location measure, in position location echo, sonar line communication setting, all through travel. Ooh-ah. Okay. Center course centers lines of communication. Okay. So, bringing this out through equation is a line signal lines of graph, center course system, and triangulation lines of flux. 3 lines of angles, 2 lines of measure. Okay. Processes indicate lines inside, inline rotations, 3 lines of measure and scale. Sets course centers, graph lines of 1, cross lines of 2. Okay. Set position over cross location lines of 3 over 4 is track locations. Setting position over line signal into rotation, where your Earth changes its direct signals of north, east, west, and south. Okay. High position is centers of Earth and set position lines of space, an anomaly that sets line division location in its position to its system all through travel. Hooah. Okay, recoursing back and set position lines of travel. All right. So, bring it back home, back in sequence, back in communications. 3 Earth in your solar system. Inside traction. Now adding gold rings over lines of rotation, line rotations, and track location lines of center communication lines of travel. Okay. Sets course centers in circulation and rotation lines in opposite set position of seconds, minutes, and hours lines of travel. Okay. Sets communication height centers over line sequence, line communication lines of 45 flux is set tractions. All right, so set position routers. So your planets are constantly in a continuous flow that line signals location setting. Clocking lines of 1, planet over here. Clocking lines of 2. So remember I told you about 24 when you delete and you cancel and you erase? Well, you do the same thing with the planets. Because it overrides the planets and takes it out of its reality in real time, that changes everything to recourse, location to its parallels, line position location to its paradigm, that retracts its correlating high position location to its system, all through its proxy. Line course centers of channel operation screen adaptation that changes the flux screens location lines of 3, 6, and 9 that patterns its division location and patterns behavior that overrides the sequence location system to your light metaphors and configurations of face recognition. Setting lines of travel. Okay, setting course centers over line screen, red over signal, gold over yellow, yellow over line position location of travel. Okay, setting signals, operation, set position, back attraction, back division, back locations. All right, so as you do with your clocking, your planets are constantly moving. Okay, so whatever's routing the router, line position location, is governing its own system. What puts it in provision lines of back and set position is your frequency and tractions. So again, in that position location of the system, soon as you turn on your TV, it's governing its own system. For you get into frequency of balance, you've got to speak through your voice and grid so it can pick up your frequency of where you left off in your consciousness system into all levels existing all at once. In frame and seconds, minutes, and hours, that puts everything in provision locations, it cancels, delete, and everything able, changes everything in modification system through your defaults of channel operation setting. Hooah. Okay, all through traction. Okay? So, what you have to really get in position location systems all through traction centers. All set calculations. Okay, it gets more complicated, right, when you go to high lines of frequency. All right, so modificate the system lines of signals, process lines at high positions. Getting lines of snowy graph and box frame. We got a box frame here in position of 4 settings, 3 set line positions, 4, 4, 4. Now the 4 decade system set lines of grounds of 3 tractions. Okay, remember you got to understand how to travel through the 4 lines and set position in the 4 measure and scale. Setting cross lines as long as it's indicating in line position, okay? As long as it's indicating in line position, okay? It's all connecting, right? It's all connecting through balance of travel, okay? It's all connecting through balance of travel, okay? And that's all through 444 and track locations, okay? And then you come into this and set position, okay? Come into this, change course centers, line direct signals, ground lines of 1, cross lines of 4, ground lines of 6, cross lines of 8, cross lines of 12, 24 lines of measure, 24 lines of scale. Use your imagination, all lines of communications, right? Pi generation 1, pi generation of 3, 4, 6, echo, Zulu, line position of Fox. Okay, so webbing screens, line signal location system to webbing. Webbing screen to a pyramid, cross lines of angles, and a straight lines of anomaly. Cross line centers are 45 line communication lines of anomaly. Okay? Over cross location lines and communication lines of anomaly. All right? Set course centers is center communication setting line position location to a system. Okay? But the override sequence puts all lines of indication setting. All through tractions, all through laser, all set position. Okay, boxing frame windows, XT1000s, outlines of signals, and 3 lines of measure. Okay, sets course centers, line position lines, and 1 sentient over cross location lines of measure. Scales communication lines on protons, high position location of measure, and scale communication lines on high position location of measure. Scales communication, remember, this is all inside line position your Skynet. Signify and direct signals into your sky points. Sky points are your power points. Line signal location to a system all through its grounds. Setting track line division, location lines of centers in rotation system and travel. Okay, very complicated stuff, but it's a lot of fun. So set position location lines in line rotation to its setting. Process calculates setting over lines of signal now. We go through red line signals because there are security panels over cross location of screens and 2 adaptation lines of surface interactions. Setting signals, setting line position location measure, and scale communications, all through interactions. Look at that, went back to signal. So we had 3 lines of measure, 3 lines of calculation. Okay, we overlined signals. Now we're going to the grounds, working way up to holographic structure of design. Creating the pyramid in outline setting. Outline, not inline. So this is inline, this is outline. Don't get confused now. How everything comes in and out in track location, out and in. Understand the provisional line, set lines of communication system all through track relation to its settings. Okay? Now we go through blue signals, blue plasma outline rotations, and 2 tractions, and 3 lines of measure, and track locations. All right, and then you go in position location levels. Let's get into cloak and dagger. Cloak and dagger sets lines over cross location in screen lines, and 3 lines of flux, the sets communication system all travel. Then we get in position locations. Remember, I can go through 12 lines of measure, 3 lines of scale. Let's go into purple. Overline signals and 3 lines of communications. Inside tractions and 4 communications, ending in 5 over 6, 6 lines of 7, 7 over 8, 9 lines of 10, and position lines of 12. Okay, so there's the pyramid tractions. Coming out with position lines of high setting. Coming out through set position. All right. Okay, so that position lines have changed the communication system all through travel, all through measure, all through scale. All right. Setting communication line sets a permanent line rotation surface of travel. Point lines of graph communication setting high travel communications. Okay. Then you come into all position locations, sonar, echo lines, screen adaptations, all levels of tango. Then we go into pink. Pink changes the ground lines of surface and track correlation system out of the calculations. So once you get in coloration system, it changes everything formation setting. Ooh-ah. Okay. So I'm trying to get you guys to understand how this all works. How to come into out of snowy graph interference of black and white, and come into the actual matrix and set the lines in mystical, your syntax, your cortex, your codex, and frame communication lines of seconds, minutes, and hours. Everything is existing and constantly existing on a continuous flow. Everything is communicating everything all at once on a continuous flow. Everything is evolving. Everything is in set position, existing, and happening all at once. And the more we modify that, the more we can get in position and how to create it from the grounds up in positions coming out of your 72 into your 144 crystal grid. Okay, attractive centers. Okay. All right. But it's very powerful when you come in this set position. okay? But always see everything on a window frame in a 4-line setting, okay? From in and out, out and in, right? In and out and in, or out and in and out. But you're always going back in because it's inside you. You're never going outside your system. So it doesn't matter how it's pink, all right? So it's inside, outside, outline. See the difference? Inside, outside, outline. Now you're around the system of nebula of a 12 clocking system. Stay within the line settings of 24 lines of measure inside the clocking system until you understand how to use the 24 clocking system outside connections. Because that overrides the 12 line signals, brings the 24 in the center, cancels out line position 24, brings in position of 48, right? You do the same thing with your planets, okay? Because your planets are constantly moving. They're moving with you. But what you also have to understand too, what I mean by that is basically you're in control with the planets itself. If you're not in control with the planet itself, the planet is rotating in its own system, that's running its own program, that's running its own space and time through its own solar system in track locations. Also division location to its setting, okay? So you have to really understand how to get into that clocking communications, all through tractions, all through track locations. Look at that, look at that, look at that. Look at the fence. Isn't that amazing? Pretty incredible, isn't it? How you look at things, and how you modify things, and how you see things, and how it rotates all together in track locations, all together, existing, happening, all at once. Okay? That's it. I'll see you guys in 5.